Hey, what's up? I am Coach Ryan Family in the Viper Pit. Today I want to talk about training to failure. Should you do it? Should you not do it? And what are kind of the common thought processes and implications that come with training to failure? Now, this is one of my favorite videos to shoot. This is one of my favorite topics. I guess I can't say that yet because I haven't made it to the end of the video. Maybe it'll suck. But this is one of my favorite things to think about and conceptualize, because if you grasp these concepts, you are forever going to have tools in your toolbox to help manipulate your own training programs. Okay, so first of all, when we talk about training to failure, we're talking about lifting a weight until you can no longer lift it. So a lot of people will stop a set when they still have several reps in the tank, if you will. These are also called reps in reserve. Most people at the gym, when you watch them, they set the weight down before they actually reach failure. So failure would be lifting a weight. Let's say you're curling a 50-pound dumbbell and you go until you attempt a repetition and you can no longer get it. That is true, complete muscular failure. There's also technical failure, which is when you lift a weight until your form or technique breaks down. That's more appropriate for barbell lifts, things like squats, bench presses, where there's an inherent safety component. Deadlifts fall in that category as well. Good mornings fall in that category. You don't really want to lift that until you absolutely can't anymore. You want to stop the set as soon as your technique breaks down. When we're talking muscle building implications, outside of anything that has a safety component, if you're doing a machine chest press, for example, that's perfectly safe, and you have a little deviation in form, it's not going to cause any issues. So there's true failure and there's technical failure. What I'm speaking about here is true muscular failure. So there's a big debate in the industry about gaining muscle. Some people say you have to train to failure, others say you shouldn't train to failure. And I just want to kind of talk about that and talk about why both of those camps exist. The reason both of those camps exist is because they can both exist in a proper muscle building program. That's right, you don't have to plant your flag in one camp or the other. You don't have to be a one set to failure guy or a 10 sets guy. You can use it and periodize it according to what you need at what time. So the first, really, and this is kind of hard for a lot of people to grasp, it's more principle based than rule based. So I'm not going to stand here and say if you do a set to failure, this is how many sets you should do. I'm not going to give you exact numbers. I'm going to show you how it is in real life, which is a continuum where we're talking more and less instead of absolute. So the first thing, there's kind of an inverse relationship between how close you are to failure and how many sets you're going to do for that given exercise. And that relationship is expressed right here. So on this axis here, on this line, the red line, you have far away from failure. And as you get increasingly up here, that's when you actually are getting closer to failure. So let's say down here, you're leaving 8 to 10 reps in the tank, 4 reps in the tank, so you could lift for 4 more reps when you decide to stop the set. And this is true failure, where you're actually trying to lift it and you can't lift it anymore. On the opposite spectrum here, you have many sets down to few sets. So as you see, the closer you get to failure, the fewer sets you're going to be able to do and the fewer sets you should do. Now, could you do a ton of sets to failure? Sure. In fact, you can do that for brief periods of time for a short overtraining response. However, if you don't understand these concepts already and you're watching this video to learn, don't even think about that principle yet, the overreaching concept and the purposeful overtraining. What we're talking about here is sustainable training that you can do for an extended period of time. In that case, if you train to failure, do a ton of sets to failure, you're going to get injured and you're going to get burnt out. Okay, you can't do that on a consistent basis and see progress. You may see progress for 1 week, 2 weeks, week 3, 4, and beyond is when the injuries start to creep in, the burnout starts to creep in, and the lack of progress. You can only train as hard as you can recover. So we're taking recovery into element here. Training to failure taxes recovery at a much higher rate than training far away from failure. So therefore, it takes more recovery resources to train to failure. So that's why you can't do as many sets, okay? So there's a crisscross here, and it's a continuum. There are no hard and fast numbers here. I'm just giving you, if you have that principle in your mind, and we're going to get into it later with load selection, I'm going to show you a real world example of a recent exercise I did and how I progressed it over 6 weeks using sets to failure and some sets not to failure, okay? So this is kind of the overarching principle here. When we talk about training to failure, you have what's known as RIR, or reps in reserve, also known as reps in the tank. This is how many reps you are away from failure. Now, the muscle building research is pretty clear that if you're interested in building muscle, you need to at least get close enough to where you're training at least 4 reps away from failure. So what that means is using a weight for 10 reps that if you tried your absolute best and pushed it to the brink, you could maybe get 14 reps with. That's the kind of difference we're looking for here. A lot of people are leaving 6, 7, 8, 10 reps in the tank, and that's why they're not making progress. And I had this with a client recently, just not making progress. So I set up an in-person session with this individual, looked over the training log. They had done 50 pounds for 10 on a given exercise. And then that week, that next session, I sat there and I told them, you're not gonna put the weight down until I tell you can put it down. I don't care if you're shaking, screaming, whatever, just keep going. I ended up getting 23 with it. So they were training with essentially 13 reps in reserve. That's why they weren't building muscle. Once we readjusted that metric, growth started happening again, okay? So, with that being said, 4 reps in reserve and fewer is gonna be the sweet spot for muscle building. Now, this is for anyone of you that train really super hard, you know there's a big gap in how this feels in the gym. This is challenging, it's gonna feel really hard, but up here, when you get to actual true failure, it takes a lot of willpower, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of that grit, I will say. Not a lot of people have the mental capacity to get up here. This arrow up here means training beyond failure. So what does that mean? Things like drop sets, where you reach actual muscular failure, then you quickly reduce the load and keep going. These are rest pause sets, where you reach muscular failure, set the weight down for just 10 seconds, and then lift it up again and eke out 2, maybe 3 more reps. These are forced repetitions, where you reach failure and you can't get it up and you have a partner assist you. Those are all things beyond failure. Now, with this, there's also a continuum of going from more stimulating to less stimulating. So these really high effort sets are more stimulating for muscle protein synthesis. So they have a higher impact on muscular hypertrophy. These sets still have impact on hypertrophy. Even doing a set of 10 with a weight that you can lift for 14 will still build muscle, but it's slightly less stimulating. Therefore, you might need a few more sets of that, if that makes sense, okay? Now, training to failure, doing more sets, what should I do? What's the best way to do it? I personally like to use a mix of both, depending on where I'm at in the year. If you're on a tight schedule, choosing to train to failure, just one set of maybe 4 different exercises, so 4 hard work sets, you can blast a great workout in just 20 minutes time. So it's great for those times in life where you're busy, but you still want to train hard. On the other end of the spectrum, like when I'm on vacation, for example, whenever I'm on vacation, I'm not working, I will always find a gym, and inevitably I'm getting more sleep, I'm eating a ton of food on vacation, so I push the volume. I'll do a ton of sets during those vacation phases, okay? More recently, I like to actually introduce a new exercise, start out with a lot of sets, far away from failure, and then over time, as we increase the load, get closer to failure and do fewer sets. That has proven to be pretty awesome lately for muscle building for me and for a lot of my clients. Now let's look at what this looks like here in practicality. So hopefully you understand this concept of stimulating reps. And if you do, let's just look at one other program, 10 sets of 10, German volume training by Charles Poliquin. You take a weight that you can lift 20 times and you do 10 sets of 10 with it. Those initial sets of 10, the first 3, 4, 5 sets of 10 aren't gonna really do much for muscle growth. It's those later sets of 10 where now the fatigue has built and now you're getting closer and closer to failure. That's where the magic happens. So it's those later sets in that workout that are the most stimulating. If you just come in and do 1 all-out sets of 10, all of those last 4 reps are stimulating, if that makes sense, all right? So let's look at what this looks like. I recently found a new, found a really killer chest supported row machine. I love chest supported row machines in all variations. This was a new one that I hadn't tried yet. And so I put it into a 6-week protocol. What I did, I broke the protocol into 2 cycles. Cycle 1 was staying away from failure. So I purposely did not try to go to failure. Cycle 2, the goal was to actually train to failure with a much lower set volume. So let's look at what this looks like. Cycle 1, workout 1, 2, 3 is the first block. First time I go in, I start to warm up on the machine. I use the lightest few plates I could find, and eventually just kind of eyeballed it and said, I'll start at 165 for the day. So I used 165 pounds. I did it for 4 sets of 10. I was sweating, I had a good pump, I could feel the muscles contracting, I used excellent technique, but it was still challenging, okay? How many reps were in the tank? I don't know, probably a fair amount though, okay? Probably a fair amount, but this was still some moderately stimulating. It was just an introductory week. The next week, I wanted to do more sets, but also heavier weight. So I went 185 pounds and I did 5 sets of 8. Now, this is 40 total reps, and this is also 40 total reps. So I ended up doing basically more work overall. I did the same amount of reps with 20 pounds heavier, okay? And still not really close to failure. The next workout, I went to 205 and I did 3 sets of 10, and then I started to get a little bit tired, 9, 9, 8. Now the reason these reps dropped off, it wasn't because I actually hit failure, it was because I was trying to avoid failure, so I wanted to drop the reps. I probably could have got 10 here, and then I probably would have crapped the bed on that last one, okay? So that ended cycle 1. No reps were taken to failure. Cycle 2, in my mind, I was like, I want to take 1 good hard set to failure. But I didn't want to just rush in and go right to that weight. You got to prepare your body a little bit with easier sets. So in cycle 2, the mindset, so cycle 1, the mindset was let's get a lot of quality work in. Cycle 2, the mindset is let's ramp up with a couple easy sets and then take 1 set to the gas pedal, balls to the wall, and see what we can do with it. So the first 2 sets in week 4, 145 for 10, obviously very easy. It's less than I even did in the first one, so it's just a warm up. And then 195 for 6. I did fewer reps just so I didn't wear myself out, and I just wanted to feel the weight and prepare my nervous system. Then I did 225 and I did as many as I could. And I got 13. And then I set the weight down for 10 seconds, picked it up again, did 3 more rest pause reps. Set it down, took another 10-second break, and then hit 2 more rest pause reps. So now I took that set beyond failure. We talked about that earlier. And I got 18 total reps at 225 pounds. So that was awesome. Next week I came back in, I wanted to go a little heavier and improve a little bit. 165 for 8, so still super easy. 205 for 5, again, we're not trying to create fatigue. And then I really wanted to blast fatigue with this last set, 245 for 16. So even though I went up 20 pounds, I still was able to do 3 more reps, okay? And then finally, in week 6, the final week of the cycle, 185 to 6, again, low rep to keep me fresh for my final set, 225 for 4. And then I did 265 for 21, set it down for 10 seconds, 2 rest pause reps, followed by 1 rest pause rep. And I was completely toast after that. I had to friggin' sit there for 8 minutes, it seemed like, before I could catch my breath to move on to the next thing. So 24 total reps at 265 pounds on that particular chest supported row machine. Now, this type of plan, it all works together because these early weeks, the first 3 weeks, you're doing a lot of volume, and those sets help you create work capacity, and then you slingshot past to get these high performance results on your last sets here. So you're not able to perform a ton of reps on your final sets here because A, you're trying to stay away from failure, and B, you've created fatigue with a bunch of earlier sets. On these, you're not really creating much fatigue with those early sets because they're lighter and they're lower repetition and you're not doing a ton of them. Now, coming off of week 3, I was probably a little tired from this. That's a lot of sets. And so week 4, I still performed well in that final set, but that's why you get a slingshot kind of rebound effect in week 5 and then especially in week 6. So by the end of week 6, all this time here, while the sets are lower and you're just doing 1 hard work set, you are reducing the fatigue that came from this section, and that's what allows you to perform in that final week. And then I'll cycle off to a new exercise. So that's how you structure the plan for optimal results. And that's how you can use both methods. You don't have to, gosh, I'd be bored to tears if I was stuck on this plan because I like to chase personal records. So I'm gonna track this. I'll note in my training diary that 265 for 21 is my personal best on this. And the next time this exercise, I want to cycle it into the rotation, I'll keep that in mind and I'll draw this up. And it may look a little different too. I may include some different techniques in the earlier weeks or different techniques in the later weeks, but the principles remain the same, and I'll try to beat this. So if I would have stayed in this lane forever, where it's kind of like sub-maximal, not super heavy weight, and you're not really setting PRs, I would have been bored to tears. But it doesn't, but if on the flip side, if you're doing these PR sets week in and week out, one set to true failure, man, it's exhausting. It will cook you because of the degree of effort you have to give on that final set to achieve results. So that's why I don't like to stick my flag in any one camp. I feel like these methods can coexist peacefully within a properly executed training program. And so hopefully you have these tools now to help you kind of figure out how to set this up for yourself. I'm Coach Ryan Family from the VIPAR Pit. If you like this video, please hit subscribe below, and I'll see you next time.